The alien sky burned red as smoke rose from the broken towers of the capital. The war had ended, but the air still carried the smell of fire and ash. Human diplomat Corin Vale stood near the edge of a cracked balcony, looking down at the city. He wasn't a soldier, but he had seen more death in the last month than in his whole life. This planet, Zalara, was supposed to be peaceful, but peace here always came with blood. A soft whisper echoed behind him. He turned quickly, hand reaching for the small blade hidden at his belt, but it was her again, Ryla. The alien woman who had followed him ever since the day he saved her from the burning ruins. She didn't speak much, only watched him with strange golden eyes that shimmered like fire when he looked at her. She wasn't like the other Zalarians. Her body was tall and graceful, with markings along her skin like glowing tattoos. She moved like a shadow, silent, quick, always aware. She had saved his life 3 times, once by pulling him out of an ambush, once by shielding him from an explosion, and once by standing in front of him with her claws raised against her own kind. And yet she had never said a word. "Why do you follow me?" Corin asked, not for the first time. But again she only looked at him, eyes glowing brighter. Then she took a single step forward, slowly, and touched the scar across his left cheek. It was a strange moment, quiet, intense, and filled with something Corin couldn't explain. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but with something warm, something deep. The ground suddenly shook, and trumpets blared across the city. Guards in gold armor approached fast, surrounding the two of them. One of them barked, "Human! The Queen summons you now." Corin looked at Ryla, who nodded once. She stepped aside, but her eyes did not leave his. There was something she wanted to say, but couldn't. The palace was a massive pyramid of silver stone, covered with vines, that glowed faint blue in the moonlight. Inside, torches burned with purple flames, and alien priests chanted words he couldn't understand. And on a high throne, wearing a crown of crystal and bone, sat the alien queen. Her eyes were sharp, her voice even sharper. "You've chosen Ryla as your mate," she said, her tone flat. Corin blinked, stunned. I never said—" But the queen raised a hand, silencing him. "She bears the mark of fire, and your presence awakened it," she said. "Your touch bound her. Your choice sealed her fate." Ryla stood beside the throne now, her head bowed, her eyes no longer glowing, her body tense like she was waiting for punishment. Corin stepped forward, confused. "I didn't mean to—" "You chose her," the queen said again, louder. "Then by the laws of Zalara you must take her sisters." 2. The room fell silent. Even the flames stopped flickering for a moment. Corin looked at Ryla, then back to the queen. "Sisters?" The queen stood slowly, her robe dragging like smoke behind her. "Ryla is one of 3, she said. 3 daughters born under eclipse, tied by soul and fate. If you claim one, you must claim all." Behind her, 2 more figures stepped forward from the shadows. One was tall and cold-looking, her eyes sharp like ice. Vecca. The other was quiet, with silver hair and strange symbols glowing across her skin. Thera neither smiled, neither spoke. But both looked at Corin with unreadable eyes. He took a step back, unsure. "I never agreed to this," he said, voice low. The queen's lips curved into a slight smile, but there was no kindness in it. "You may leave," she said, "but if you do, Ryla will die." His heart stopped. Ryla finally raised her head, her lips parting, but still no words came, only her eyes spoke, glowing faintly again with that fire that first caught his attention. Not a fire of destruction, but of hope, of longing, of something ancient and sacred. He didn't know the rules of this world. He didn't understand their laws, their magic, their queens. But he understood one thing. Ryla had stood between him and death again and again, and now it was his turn, I choose her, Corin said, his voice steady. I don't understand all this, but I won't let her die. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Then you have 3 days to prove your worth to all 3. Fail, and your bond will break. And when it breaks, she dies. The golden light in Ryla's eyes flared again. As the doors closed behind him, 3 days, 3 daughters, and 1 impossible choice. Corin couldn't sleep that night. The guest chamber they gave him was large, filled with soft lights and alien tapestries, but his thoughts were too loud. He sat near the window. Watching the moons pass over Zalara's red sky, below, the city moved slowly, rebuilding after war, but something much deeper was broken inside him too. He had only meant to protect Ryla, but now his one choice had dragged him into something. Far beyond love or duty, 3 sisters, 3 powerful daughters of the Queen. He didn't even know them, and yet their future now somehow depended on him. A knock came at the door, soft but certain. It slid open, and a familiar figure entered. It was Vecca, the cold-eyed sister. She wore dark armor, her face sharp and unreadable. She walked without a sound, and stopped only a few steps away. You have until the 3rd sun passes, she said without emotion. If we reject you, the bond is broken, and our fire sister dies. Corin stood slowly, unsure. I didn't mean for any of this, he said. I just didn't want her to die. Vecca narrowed her eyes. And now you may be the reason she does. Before he could answer, she turned and walked away. The door stayed open, and a strange mist slipped in, glowing blue. Another figure stepped through. Thera, the 3rd sister. She was calm, quiet, almost dreamlike in how she moved. Her eyes glowed not like fire, but like starlight, soft, distant, and powerful. I saw your dreams, she said softly. You are not like the others, Corin blinked. You were inside my mind. Thera nodded slowly. You dreamed of war, but hated killing, she whispered. You dreamed of love, but feared what it might cost. He took a shaky breath. I'm just a man trying to do the right thing. She tilted. Her head. Then show us, she said, before vanishing like smoke. The next morning, the Queen summoned him again. This time the throne room was not empty. It was a trial chamber. Dozens of Zalarians sat in high seats, watching from all sides. The Queen stood beside a wide circular platform carved with glowing lines. You have chosen Ryla, she said, but to keep her, you must be accepted by her sisters. The trial of 3 begins now. Corin looked around nervously. What kind of trial? He asked. You must prove you are worthy of the bond, the Queen replied. Each daughter will test you in her own way. Survive all 3 and the bond will be complete. Fail, and you will return to Earth, broken and alone. The crowd murmured. Corin's throat was dry, but he nodded. I'll face them, he said. All 3. The Queen smiled. But it wasn't kindness. It was curiosity, like a hunter watching something rare walk into her trap. The platform changed shape, the floor shifting like liquid. Suddenly, he stood in a wide, empty space surrounded by fire. Vecca appeared, her armor shining red in the flames. My trial is pain, she said, not just yours but mine. Will you take it for someone else? Suddenly, the flames wrapped around his chest like burning ropes. He fell to his knees, gasping, but he didn't scream. Instead, he looked at her through the pain and said, If this is what Ryla feels, I'll carry it. The fire vanished. Vecca looked at him silently, then stepped aside. The scene shifted again. He was now standing on a flat, mirror-like floor. Stars hung above him like slow-moving lanterns. Thera floated down from above, her hair glowing silver. My trial is truth, she whispered. Tell me something you've never told anyone. Corin hesitated, heart pounding. He looked at her glowing eyes and said, When I was young, I ran from battle. I left my team behind. They died. Thera watched him closely, then slowly nodded. Truth is the first step to healing, she said, and faded away. Corin collapsed, exhausted. The ground beneath him shook again, and now Ryla stood before him. But something was wrong. She was in chains, eyes dim, body trembling. She cannot test you, the Queen's voice echoed, because she has already chosen you. But her heart is still uncertain. Ryla looked at him, not speaking, not moving. Corin walked forward, ignoring the crowd, the heat, the trials. He knelt in front of her and gently placed his forehead against hers. You don't need to speak, he whispered. I'm not leaving you. For a second, her eyes flickered with light. Then the chains shattered. The Queen stood from her throne, eyes wide. The bond holds, she said, but the final choice is still yours. You must accept all three, or let them all go. The crowd gasped. Corin turned to see Vecca and Thera standing beside Ryla now. None of them spoke, but all three looked at him, waiting. His heart raced. He hadn't just passed a test. He had earned their gaze, but the final choice would come later. The sons of Zalara rose together the next morning, their twin light casting golden shadows across the royal palace. Corin stood at the training grounds, heart pounding, clothes still marked by ash and sweat from yesterday's trials. The Queen's. Words still echoed in his ears. Accept all three, or lose them all. He hadn't slept. Not because of fear, but because of what he had seen in their eyes. Each sister was different, strange, and powerful in her own way. But behind their strength he saw pain, loneliness, and longing. He was not just choosing a mate anymore. He was standing in front of three broken hearts, each waiting to be understood. The Queen had granted him one day to spend time with each sister, alone. A day to prove himself not with fire or magic or mind, but with heart. If even one of them rejected him, the bond would fail. Vecca was first. She met him near the war hall, where broken swords still hung on the walls as symbols of peace. She wore light armor and carried a long staff, her hair tied back tightly. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were watching everything. "Walk with me," she said, without waiting for an answer. They walked across the stone garden in silence. Finally, Vecca spoke. "You are not what I expected." Corin looked at her, curious. "What did you expect?" he asked. "A coward," she replied. "A weak diplomat with smooth words and no spine. But you did not cry when I burned you. You did not lie to Thera, and you did not kneel before the Queen." Corin smiled slightly. "I've been scared every minute since I got here, but I won't run." She stopped walking, turned, and handed him the staff. "Then fight me," she said. "Let me see if your spirit is real." Corin took the staff slowly, unsure. "I'm not trained like you," he warned. "Good," she said, and attacked. The duel wasn't pretty. Vecca moved like lightning, and Corin barely blocked her strikes. He stumbled, slipped, got hit on the shoulder and the leg. But he kept. Getting up, every time he rose, she struck harder, and every time he stood, her expression changed. Finally, she stopped, breathing hard. "You are not strong," she said, "but you are unbreakable." She stepped close, her voice lower. "Ryla chose well." Corin looked at her carefully. "And what about you?" Vecca didn't answer directly. Instead, she brushed a hand over his shoulder where he was bruised. "I do not give my trust easily," she said, "but today I give you a piece of it." She turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the garden. Next came Thera. She waited for him in a quiet tower above the city, where stars were studied and dreams were recorded. The room was filled with glowing crystals and floating books that turned their own pages. She didn't speak at first, only watched him with those quiet, glowing eyes. "Why don't you speak much?" Corin asked, sitting near her. She smiled softly. Because words are weak. I hear people's minds, their pain, their hopes. I hear lies even when mouths speak truth. He nodded slowly. Can you hear mine now? She touched his forehead lightly and her eyes fluttered closed. Moments passed in silence, then her voice came, calm and quiet. You miss your mother? You blame yourself for things you could not stop. You never thought you were good enough to be chosen. Corin's eyes watered, just a little. You're right, he whispered. Thera sat beside him, closer now. You are not perfect, she said, but you do not hide. That is rare, he turned to her. And you? What do you want? She looked away, then whispered, to be seen, not just read. To be held, not just heard. Corin reached out and took her hand gently. Then let me see you, he said. All of you. She didn't pull away. She leaned against him and whispered, I accept you, Corin. His chest tightened. 2 sisters had given him a part of themselves. Only one remained, Ryla. He went to the old garden where he first saw her save his life. The trees were burned, the flowers gone. Ryla stood alone, looking at the sky. Her eyes still glowed, but faintly. You haven't said a single word, Corin said gently. Not one. I've fought. I've bled. I've shared everything, and I still don't know what you want. Ryla turned slowly, stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart. Then her voice finally came, soft, cracked, and full of meaning. I want to be his only, she said, but I will not be selfish. Corin was stunned. Her voice was beautiful, sad, and full of fire. You are not selfish, he said, taking her hands in his. You are brave. I chose you, Ryla, not just because I had to, but because I saw your fire. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. And if you choose them too? She asked. He looked up at the ruined garden, then back at her. Then I'll build something new for all of you, he said. Not because of a law, but because I want to. Ryla closed her eyes, and for the first time, her fire glowed bright, brighter than ever before. The palace lights dimmed as the third sun began to set. The trials were complete, and Corin stood in the Hall of Choice, surrounded by silence. Alien symbols glowed along the floor, slowly pulsing like a heartbeat. He had faced pain, shared his truth, and earned the trust of all 3 sisters, or so he thought. But now, the queen waited on her throne once again, her eyes cold, her mouth unreadable. Around them, nobles, soldiers, and elders gathered to witness what they believed could never happen. A human bonding with the 3 heirs of Zalara. Step forward, the queen said, her voice echoing through the hall like thunder. Corin walked to the center of the circle, his body sore but his heart steady. He looked at Ryla, Vecca, and Thera standing in a line across from him. They were silent, serious, glowing with soft light. He had earned their moments, their truths. But now came the final rite. Speak your vow, the queen commanded. Corin nodded. I came to this world as a stranger, he began. But now I stand here. Because I was seen, protected, and tested, each of you showed me who you truly are. And if you'll have me, not as a king or savior, but as your partner, I vow to stay. The hall was silent, heavy with expectation. The queen's eyes narrowed. Then kneel, Corin did, resting both knees on the glowing floor. A priestess stepped forward, carrying 3 glowing crystals, each one matching the light of a sister. They floated above his head, spinning gently, waiting for the sisters to complete the bond. Vecca stepped forward first, her hand over her heart. I accept this bond, she said firmly. The red crystal lit up and sank into Corin's chest, marking him with a glowing symbol. Then Thera stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "I accept this bond," she whispered. The silver crystal followed, sinking into his body like mist and leaving behind a star-shaped mark. All eyes turned to Ryla. She stepped forward slowly, but her fire was dim, her steps unsteady. Corin looked at her with gentle eyes, but something felt wrong. Ryla stopped, in front of him, staring down. Then she whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "I cannot!" Gasps filled the chamber. The golden crystal froze in midair, then cracked with a sharp sound. A powerful shockwave burst from the center, knocking Corin backward. The bond had broken. Corin hit the ground hard, his heart racing. He looked up at Ryla, confused. Her eyes were full of pain, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, and turned away. The queen rose instantly, raising her hand. "The bond is incomplete," she declared, "and by our law, the punishment must follow." Guards stepped forward, weapons drawn. Corin jumped to his feet. "No, wait. This isn't her fault." "She's scared, confused. This doesn't have to be punishment." "She refused," the queen said coldly. "And she will be exiled." Corin tried to rush forward, but two guards slammed him to the ground. He shouted, "Ryla, look at me, please." But she kept walking, her back straight, even though her shoulders trembled. Vecca and Thera stood, frozen, eyes wide with shock. They had not expected this, not after everything they had seen. Even they couldn't speak, bound by law and silence. Corin was dragged from the hall, his arms bound. The queen gave the final command. "Remove him from the palace," she said. "By morning, he returns to Earth." Outside the palace walls, the night air was cold. Corin sat alone in the prison garden, his body bruised but his spirit shattered. He had tried everything, given his truth, his pain, his loyalty, and still, it wasn't enough. He looked up at the stars, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't come here to save a world. I just wanted to save her." Footsteps echoed softly across the garden stones. He turned his head, expecting a guard, but it was Vecca. She stood behind the bars, her face hard, but her voice shook slightly. "She didn't break the bond because of fear," she said. "She did it to protect you." Corin frowned. "Protect me from what?" Thera appeared beside Vecca, her silver hair glowing under the moon. "She saw something," Thera said, her voice filled with sorrow. "She saw the Queen's plan. If you completed the bond, the Queen would use you to awaken an ancient weapon." Corin's heart dropped. "It was never about marriage," he whispered. "It was about power." Thera nodded slowly. "But she didn't tell us," she said, "because she knew we wouldn't let you go." Corin closed his eyes, breathing deeply. So Ryla had sacrificed her happiness to protect him. She had broken her own heart just to keep him safe. "I have to find her," he said suddenly, standing up. "I can't let her carry this alone." Vecca looked at him with fire in her eyes. "Then we will help you escape," she said, "because none of us want to be used ever again." Corin looked between them, two sisters who once tested him, now ready to defy their queen, and one sister, alone and heartbroken, waiting somewhere. In the shadows, he clenched his fists. If this was a broken bond, then he would rebuild it, with fire, truth, and love. The secret tunnels beneath the palace were cold and narrow. Corin followed Vecca and Thera in silence, their footsteps soft on the stone. They moved quickly, knowing the Queen's guards would soon realize he had escaped. The deeper they went, the more the air felt heavy, like it carried old memories. "These paths were built before the first queen," Thera whispered. "Back when the palace was still a fortress." "Where are we going?" Corin asked, gripping the side wall as they turned sharply. Vecca answered without looking back. "To the Chamber of Echoes," she said. where truths are kept buried. They entered a massive hall carved entirely from black stone. Crystals hung in the air, floating slowly, glowing dimly with shifting colors. The walls pulsed with light like a heartbeat. In the center stood a strange altar, covered in markings that pulsed gold, just like the glow in Ryla's eyes. "This is the source," Thera said, stepping forward. "This is what the Queen wanted to control." Corin stared, unsure. "What is it?" he asked, voice low. Vecca ran her fingers along the altar. "A relic of the ancients," she said. "A bond forging. Device meant to unlock something powerful. A weapon?" Corin guessed. Thera shook her head. "No," she said. "Something older. Something alive." "Some say it is the heart of Zalara itself." Vecca turned toward him. "When the bond is completed between a human and the three daughters, it reacts," she explained. "It awakens the relic." Corin frowned. "But why me? Why would the Queen care if I bonded with them?" Thera looked sad. "Because only a human can activate it," she said. "The last time this happened, your kind were still new to the stars." Corin's eyes widened. "So all of this, Ryla's trial, her silence, the law, it was never about tradition. It was a trap." Vecca nodded slowly. "The Queen wanted to use you," she said. "She wanted to take your bond and twist it into control." Corin took a shaky breath. "And Ryla knew," he whispered. "That's why she broke the bond." Thera stepped closer, placing a hand over his chest. "She saw the future in her visions," she said. "If the bond had completed, the Queen would have used your power to crush other worlds." Corin felt a burning inside him, not from anger, but from sorrow. "She gave up everything," he whispered, "just to protect me. She thought we would hate her for it." Thera added, her voice quiet. "But we don't." Suddenly, the chamber began to rumble. The floating crystals pulsed faster, glowing red. Vecca looked around sharply. "We've stayed too long." "She knows we're here," the Queen's voice echoed through the chamber, though she was nowhere to be seen. "You disappoint me." "Daughters," it said, low and venomous. "You would betray your own blood for a man who barely understands your world." Thera grabbed Corin's arm. "We must go, now!" But before they could move, a hidden door opened with a soft hiss, and Ryla stepped into the chamber. Her hair was messy, her clothes torn, but her eyes burned like never before. "Stop," she said firmly, voice trembling with emotion. "I will not run anymore." Corin stared at her, stunned. "Ryla," he said, voice barely a whisper. "You came back." She walked to him, each step slow and steady. "I saw what was coming," she said. "I thought I could stop it alone." "But I was wrong." Vecca stepped back, letting Ryla stand before Corin. "I don't care about ancient laws," Ryla said. "I care about truth, and the truth is, I still choose you." The crystals began to glow gold again, brighter this time. The chamber responded to her voice, to her heart. Corin took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I choose you too," he said. "All of you. Not because I have to. Because I want to." Vecca and Thera stepped forward again, each placing a hand on his shoulders. Together, the four stood in the center of the chamber. The altar pulsed once, then erupted in light. Symbols rose around them, floating in the air like ancient music. The walls glowed, the air vibrated, and something deep below the palace stirred. Then the Queen's voice screamed again, "Fools! You've awakened it! I will not let you take what is mine!" Suddenly, the ground cracked and dozens of guards burst into the chamber, weapons drawn, eyes wild. Vecca turned, drawing her twin blades. Thera's eyes glowed white as mist. Spiraled around her hands, Ryla stepped forward, fire swirling around her arms, and Corin stood at the center, unchained, chosen, and ready. He wasn't a soldier, not really, but for them, for the bond, they would fight as one. The chamber burned with light as the relic awakened. Power flowed through the floor, through the air, through their bones. Corin stood in the center, with Ryla, Vecca, and Thera circling him like stars around a sun. For the first time, the bond between them was whole and alive. But the moment didn't last. The Queen's guards stormed in with weapons drawn, their faces pale with fear. Dozens of them filled the chamber, surrounding the four like a steel trap. And behind them walked the Queen herself, her long black robe flowing like smoke, her eyes sharp with rage. "You were warned," she said coldly. "You were given your place, but you chose defiance." Corin stepped forward, shielding the sisters. "We chose freedom," he said, his voice strong. "You tried to use them." "They are mine," the Queen growled. "They were born to serve the throne, not to love a human." Ryla's fire burned, bright in her hands. "I was not born to be owned," she said, her voice firm. "I am not yours." The Queen raised her arm. "Then die with him," she snapped. The guards charged, but they weren't ready for what came next. Vecca moved first, a blur of speed and blades, striking with perfect precision. She spun through the line of soldiers like a storm, her twin swords glowing with heat. Thera stepped back, her eyes shining like moons. She lifted her hands and whispered something ancient. A wave of mist rose around them, thick and blinding, confusing the enemy. Corin grabbed a fallen guard's shield and stood close to Ryla. He wasn't trained like Vecca, or gifted like Thera, but he had heart, and that was enough. Ryla's fire circled them both like a wall of heat, melting every arrow that flew their way. "We have to reach the relic's heart," Thera shouted. "It can end this, but only if we reach it together." The Queen's voice echoed again, louder and angrier. "You don't understand what you're waking," she said. "You'll doom us all." But Corin didn't believe her anymore. He had felt the relic's pulse. It wasn't destruction. It was life. It was the soul of the people, stolen and locked away by fear and control. Together, they pushed forward, deeper into the chamber. The relic's light guided them down a staircase hidden beneath the altar. Below, the heart of the relic pulsed like a golden sun trapped in stone. It filled the space with warmth, like a memory of safety and truth. The Queen followed, alone now, her guards defeated or scattered. She stepped into the chamber, eyes wide with panic. "You can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "If the relic chooses you, it will destroy me." "That's not our choice," Ryla said quietly. "It's yours." Corin stepped forward, the three sisters beside him. They joined hands, fire, mist, blade, and placed them all upon the heart of the relic. Corin reached out last, his fingers trembling, but his voice clear. "We choose peace," he said, "not fear. We choose truth." The relic exploded in light, not with fire but with warmth. A wave of golden energy rushed through the palace, passing through every wall and hallway. The nobles dropped their weapons, the slaves lifted their heads, the chains that held minds and laws for generations shattered in silence. The Queen screamed as the wave passed through her. Her crown cracked, her robe faded, and her body sank to the floor. Not dead, but powerless, stripped of what she had stolen. When the light faded, Corin fell to one knee, breathless. Ryla caught him, holding him close, her eyes filled with tears. "You did it," she whispered. "No," he said, smiling weakly. "We did." Above them, the people of Zalara gathered slowly, drawn by the light. They had felt the pulse, the change, the call of something ancient and pure, and when they saw the three sisters standing hand in hand with the human who had been willing to lose everything, they did not bow in fear. They knelt in hope. Vecca raised her sword, not in threat, but in salute. Thera placed her hands over her heart, and Ryla looked at Corin, her fire calm. "I burned for so long," she said. "But you gave my flame purpose." Corin stood, holding all three of their hands. "This isn't just the end of her reign. he said. "It's the beginning." "Of yours," the crowd cheered. Not for a king or a savior, but for the bond that had saved them all. The ruins of the throne room glowed softly in the morning light. What had once been a place of fear was now quiet, still, and waiting. The queen sat alone on the shattered steps of her throne, her crown broken beside her. Her once mighty voice was now silent, her power gone, her rule ended. Corin stood near the great doors, watching the people gather slowly. They didn't come with weapons or chains. They came with questions, with hope. With eyes wide open, beside him stood the three sisters, Ryla, Vecca, and Thera. No longer bound by duty or silence, they stood as equals, as leaders, as hearts reborn. The golden mark of the relic still glowed faintly on their chests and corons, a symbol not of rule, but of unity. One elder stepped forward. From the crowd, a man with gray skin and bright eyes, who had served the palace for generations, he bowed deeply, not to Corin, but to the sisters. "Zalara is yours now," he said, his voice trembling, "not to control, but to guide." Vecca looked at her sisters, then nodded once. "We do not want a throne," she said. "We want balance." Thera stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "We will not rule with fear," she said. "We will rule with voice and choice." And Ryla, quiet and strong, stepped last. "I will light the way," she said, "but I will never again burn for someone else's greed." The crowd cheered, not with noise but with feeling. Hands were raised, tears were shed, heads were bowed in respect. Something ancient had ended, and something beautiful had begun. Corin walked to the queen, still seated on her broken throne. She looked up at him, tired, her pride long gone. "You don't understand what you've done," she whispered. "The relic's light. It changes everything." Corin nodded slowly. "I know," he said, "and that's why it had to be done." She looked at Ryla, and for the first time her face showed sorrow. "You were always the quiet one." The queen said, "I never thought you'd be the one to break the chains." Ryla met her gaze without anger. "I didn't break them," she said. "I melted them." The queen said nothing more. She stood slowly and turned away, walking down the broken steps into the crowd. No one stopped her, no one bowed, no one followed. She was no longer queen, she was simply forgotten. Later in the garden once blackened by war, new life began to grow. The relic's energy had seeped into the ground, and green vines had returned. The sisters walked together, their hands brushing across the fresh leaves. Corin followed, quietly, his heart full but still unsure. "What happens now?" he asked, looking at them. "Do I stay here?" Ryla turned and stepped toward him. "You are part of us now," she said, "not because of a law, but because you chose to be." Vecca smirked. "Besides, we still need someone to argue with the council." "You humans are good at that," Thera smiled gently, "and someone to hold us when our minds are too loud." "You're good at that too," Corin laughed softly. "So, what am I now? Ambassador? Partner? Pet project?" Ryla placed her hands on his shoulders. "You are our bond," she said. "You're the bridge between stars and hearts." "And you're mine," she added, her voice soft. "Always mine," he pulled her into a quiet embrace. And soon, Vecca and Thera joined them, arms wrapped in a circle of warmth and light. They were not just bonded by choice, they were bonded by survival, by truth, by something no law could ever define. Far above the palace, ships from other worlds began to arrive. Not for war, but for peace talks. Zalara would no longer be feared. It would be respected, because its daughters had changed its future with courage and love. Corin stood beside the sisters as the first human shuttle landed. A man in a gray uniform stepped out, shocked to see Corin alive. "You were supposed to be dead," the officer said. "The mission was declared failed." Corin smiled. "It didn't fail," he said. "It became something better." The officer looked at the 3 alien women behind him. "And who are they?" he asked. Corin turned, smiling wider. "They're my future," he said simply. "And maybe yours too." The sisters stood tall behind him, the wind catching their long robes. The past was gone, the chains broken, the crown forgotten. Now there was only the bond and the light and a new world rising.